Is that registering now? I think it is. Alrighty. Good evening, folks. Today is March 17th. Welcome to the narrative hosted by me, Stepfire. I think I'm going solo today. On the board today, we will be going over the Tesla vandalization that's been happening. It's a little more extensive than I thought before diving into the story here. And our second topic. I apologize. The second topic we're going to be going over is the shutting down the Department of Education. We'll go over a little bit of stuff there. Had an incredibly busy week this week, so I have almost had no time to prepare for this week. So, we might be, I don't know if we're going to continue with it, but we might be going over Platonism after we get done with the news shows portion. So, let's see here. I guess we can. We'll just jump right into the Tesla vandals. So, Elon Musk's involvement with President Donald Trump through DOE has tanked the popularity of the world's richest man, as far as we know. According to the latest national poll from Quinnipiac University, 60% of voters disapprove of the way Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, are dealing with workers employed by the federal government. While 36% approve. Republicans is 77 to 16, while Democrats is a 96 to 2 disapprove, and Independents a 68-28 disapprove. 44% of voters think Elon Musk and Doge are hurting the country, while 40% think they are helping the country. According to a national CNN poll, just 35% of Americans express a positive view of Musk, with 53% rating him negatively. Roughly 6 in 10 Americans say that Musk has neither the right experience nor the right judgment to make changes to the way the government works. There is uneasiness about Musk, even among some of the president's supporters. 28% of those who see Trump's changes to the government as necessary doubt the tech billionaire has the judgment to carry them out. The Washington Post Ipsos poll has Musk's approval rating at a 34%, which is pretty low. Recently, Tesla cars have been taking the ire of this discontent. In the U.S., Germany, and the U.K., Tesla cars have been shot at, set ablaze, stickered with messages to not buy the, quote, swastika, unquote, and had big red swastikas marked into them. Some Tesla owners, in an attempt to save their cars, have stickered their own cars with, quote, bought before Elon went crazy, end quote. On March 13th, a Tesla dealership in Oregon received gunfire, more than a dozen rounds, for the second time that week, the first incident occurring on March 6th. In a Seattle suburb, police have reported that 6 Cybertrucks at a dealership there were vandalized with swastikas and curses directed at Elon. The city of Seattle reported 4 Cybertrucks were destroyed by fire, but didn't indicate whether the fire or fires were intentional. German police said on Friday that 4 Teslas were set ablaze in a neighborhood in Berlin and is being investigated by the State Security Division of the Berlin State Criminal Police Office for its possible political motivations. In South Carolina, A Tesla charging station was vandalized by Molotov cocktails. On March 3rd in Massachusetts, the 7 Tesla charging stations were targeted with fire attacks. The Littleton Police Department has determined these fires have been set deliberately. According to the Loveland Police Department in Colorado, a woman was arrested after police found her with explosives at a Tesla dealership. She was caught through an investigation launched following a series of vandalization at the same dealership. She was apprehended. Since about January 20th of this year, Tesla stocks have come crashing down pretty hard from a high of $426.50 all the way down to $222.15 on March 9th. This is a whopping 48% plummet since President Trump was elected. There are many factors that could be contributing to this. One, Elon Musk's main focus seems to be diverted from Tesla and SpaceX and towards Doge, and investors like when their CEOs are focused on the company. Two, the media campaign against Elon Musk has seriously damaged his reputation, as indicated by multiple polling institutions. This could be an attributing factor to reason number 3, the vandalism and arson and social pressure against Teslas and Cybertrucks themselves and their owners. Trump had Elon at the White House to show off a Tesla that Trump had bought on the spot for White House staff to drive for $80,000. Tesla saw a small bump of 4% in its stock after Trump endorsed the Tesla. So this is, I mean, I didn't know that there was that much damage going on around the country and in other countries, Germany, the UK. You can go on X. I was looking on there earlier today, and you can just type in Tesla, and you can type in like vandals or damaged or whatever, and you can just scroll through and just see all sorts of pictures of people like walking by and keying the cars who walk by a Tesla. I don't know how. I don't know, what goes through people's mind. I mean, I know that a lot of the news stories that I was reading today, because today is when I fucking had to do all my research for the most part. While I was looking into it, almost every article that I had read had mentioned the perceived Nazi salute that people say that Elon Musk did, that I give you my heart thing. And that's why I had mentioned the serious reputational damage that the media has done in their campaign. It's working, but in a way that's kind of the genius to it all, because Elon is the one that's taking the brunt of the hits. Some of this is spilling over into Donald Trump's approval ratings. We are seeing them slip a little bit. People losing confidence. According to polling, of course, it's polling, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But we have to have some sort of indicator, and that's kind of what I've chosen to more so measure change than actual what the actual hard number would be for approval rating and such. So if it's going up, I just assume that more people are happier with what's taking place in the administration and whatnot. So in that way, it is quite genius. But there's a few other things. I mean, there has been some positive economic indicators too. So it's not like it's all doom and gloom. Inflation has been, the rate of inflation has been cut to, I think it was 1.5 when I read it, which is pretty awesome. What's going on, Smoking Spaceman? It's good to see you again. Our very first ever chatter. It's good to see you, man. So we do have some positive indicators. The rate of inflation, 1.5%, from what I saw, down from a 2.4, I believe it was. Now, I don't know how these might change, because a lot of this stuff, tariffs weren't actually a part of the bargain when making these calculations. So we do have to see how the tariffs are going to play. I do believe that it might get a little rough um, for particularly people that are like on that line of like food insecurity and stuff like that. Um, but I pray that that's not how it happens. I pray that we've allowed ourselves, we've just we've gotten fat on the hog, and now we've got to go try to fix this, and the damage that we've accumulated, and we've just kicked the can down the road. We just ignore the problem, and we're just the entire gamble is that we're going to grow our way out of whatever inflation happens. So the set rate at the Fed is 2%. So they are trying to reach a 2% inflation rate every year. So, and that's the target. The target's not zero. The target's not -2. They're not trying to make your dollars worth more. Every year, the expressed purpose is to make your money 2% less valuable. The attempt, from my understanding, that is a way of building and more covertly redistributing wealth. Yeah, I agree. I do think I do believe it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's Trump's second term, so there's no reelection worry that he has to be concerned with, which is another concern of mine, because the pendulum can swing back the other way just as hard as it is swung this way so far. We have to move carefully, or we just lose the American people, and then we get back on the train of debauchery, and uh, we just go the way of Rome. It ends up crumbling from within. We more so go the way of Britain, where I think we end up becoming a midterms are going to be key. Yeah, I mean they're going to be important, but that's the that's the problem. Is the hurt, I believe, is going to be hidden before midterms. So that means halfway through Trump's administration, his second administration, the House and Senate could swing back to Democrats, and then we have exactly what we had in the end of his last term, where nothing really can get done. Yeah, yeah. If we don't win in the midterms, it's all for naught. Yeah, and I mean that's true. Like I said, we're gonna end up being in the same spot we were in 2020. So where they can just block everything, they can just make sure nothing gets done, um, and then obviously blame Trump for causing all the trouble. Um, so there's a lot to consider with this being his second term, and I'm not. I think Trump is gonna. I think Trump is doing the right thing, and I think that given time, the damage that is done will be much will be paid off by the benefits that come with it. The benefits, as I would understand them, is building a more durable and diverse, and I don't mean that in the modern fucking people of all color, kind of diversity. I just mean spread out through diverse industries within the economy. We can build a solid middle class. The middle class is the people you tax to get your tax revenue. That is where you get a majority of your tax revenue is from the middle class, because the middle class is supposed to make up something like 60% of the population. That's kind of what you're aiming for. If you can get it higher than that, that's great. But you kind of have to work within the bounds that you're given. So with him with this being his second term, and Trump is a little bit of an egomaniac. It is all about winning for him, and in this case, winning for the country is winning for him. So um, I believe that if he's not careful, then we lose the midterms. There's that. Then we possibly lose the next election, even though we won't have an incumbent. It's kind of going to be written off. I mean, I know that the Democrat Party right now is a fucking disaster. So we got to have that to bank on a little bit. They don't know the whole Schumer thing with trying to block the bill, the continuing resolution, in order to avoid the government shutdown. It's just like, you just look at it on the surface. It's like, you're the one out here like, we're going to stop this, and then it gets stopped, and people are going to be like, well, why is the government shut down? And you just point to Chuck Schumer and his, big ass mouth, little goblin mouth. So, I mean, there is that to bank on. It does seem like the Democrats are really, at least a faction of them, a significant enough faction of them, is holding on to the trans ideology stuff. And that is going to be a loser in front of the American people for the most part. When it comes to trans people in sports, for instance, that's an 80-20 proposition. 80% of the American people polled, it's 79%, but that's as close as you'll get to 80 as you can get. So 79% of the American population agree that men should not be participating in women's sports. The fact that we've, as a society, have been caught up on this debate to begin with is baffling in and of itself. Let alone how long we have been. It just would seem so intuitive to look at a man, your average man, and look at your average woman, and just be like, yeah, there's a difference there, and it's not just a subtle difference; it's a pretty massive difference. And when you're talking about competition, you're not talking about the average; you're talking about the peak. Well, when it comes to peak performance, I think outside of endurance, running, and swimming, men dominate everything. Everything. So I don't know how this debate has been able to go on without just being so absurd that people just don't engage with the debate. It just seems so ridiculous. So as long as the Democrats keep holding on to that retarded position, that's going to alienate a good chunk of the American people away from the Democrats. So we're kind of banking on Trump pulling a rabbit out of the hat here for the most part to avoid midterm disasters. And we're also banking on the Democrats to remain as retarded as they are, which, they are who they are. So it's kind of, I think it's, I don't know. I'm not confident either way. And I try to just look at it as honestly as I can. I don't like the sycophantic shit. I don't like making excuses for every story that comes out and trying to provide a way around what the narrative might be, by positing your own narrative that is just as unsubstantiated as the opposing narrative. All of that shit is a poison to the mind. I think that it is objectively true that the Democrats are off the fucking reserve right now. They're out to sea, and there's a point in which you might be a bunch of them are going to come back. They're by necessity. They're going to end up being either voted out, or once they see polling coming in, that's really going to affect them. What's going on, Elder Lion? It's good to see you, man. The Dems are going to try to get control of the narrative machine gun again. Yeah, the narrative machine gun. Yeah. What's funny? Well, I mean, what's funny is I listen to like Pod Save America to see kind of what these guys are on the left saying, and these are they have big people on there, Gavin Newsom and the DNC chair, and they have big figures that come through there. So they're worth listening to, if only to understand kind of what that side is saying. These were guys from the Obama administration. I think one of them was a speechwriter, and one of them worked was one of the staff. Nothing high end, but he kind of still got to see the inner workings of the White House during the Obama era. So I listened to these guys, and I forgot where I was going with it. Oh, the narrative. These guys talk about like how the media landscape is right wing dominated, and I don't understand what they mean by that, because if you just start listing off mainstream media and I consider the bigger alternative media companies, Daily Wire being one, I consider that mainstream, because that is the amount of eyeballs the Daily Wire gets is pretty massive, and I think that it adequately represents the conservative mindset in a lot of ways. There's some issues. Not getting into any of that. I have my issues with the Daily Wire as well, but I still consider them still kind of mainstream. Everybody knows who they are, and the same thing would apply to like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know if I would say maybe David Pakman. He would kind of be more of a mainstream figure as well. A lot of the lefties listen to him and take what he says to heart, and so these guys are talking about like the media landscape is dominated by the right wing, and it's like, yeah, maybe they're the biggest growing companies right now are more of the right wing media companies, because people are flocking to them because they're running with their hair on fire away from the mainstream, or legacy media is what we can call that, in order to legacy media, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, controlled opposition. Yeah, I mean, look, the Israel thing is kind of pops the bubble of the conservative principled positions within the right, within the mainstream conservative movement in America, simply because the argument isn't made because this person is of some great ally, and in some ways they are. I'm not going to deny that they're in some ways now, but they're not. We have more interests elsewhere in the world, and Ben Shapiro makes it abundantly clear that the entire reason for him defending Israel is because he himself is a Jew. Like, that's the entire reason. So I've heard some pro-Zionist arguments that I'm not like totally opposed to. I've heard plenty of anti-Zionist arguments, most of which I'm opposed to. But when it comes to that issue in particular with the Daily Wire, you can tell that you have to move in lockstep with that position. So now Ben Shapiro has become the enemy within the right-wing sphere, that is kind of forcing a prescription that he wants to see on a personal level that he can't justify on a national level, why we should be bogged down in the Middle East and with spending money on a country. I mean, I'm all for helping people and keeping them from dying. I mean, I'm all for all of that. But you can tell that the motivations from the Daily Wire are not based on a conservative principle within the framework of America. It's more so of, the guy who runs the show's a Jew, and if you say anything, you'll be Candace Owens out of there. Because she wasn't on board with the whole messaging, and she had her disagreements with it. And oddly enough, as soon as these disagreements start coming up, now there's a spat war between Ben Shapiro. He's talking shit. He's personally hurt because Candace Owens was like, I don't agree with you. And he was like, he turned to a little drama queen about it and was like gossiping behind her back. Didn't even know he was being recorded. It just didn't look good at all. It kind of exposed the Daily Wire to me. Because they were like, the Daily Wire was how I got into politics at all. It's the only reason I ever got interested in it, and eventually I got into political philosophy, and then just philosophy because that shit's interesting. So these guys, the whole Daily Wire crew, kind of brought me up, where they were my political parents, introduction into the political world. And Crowder was there too. He was one of those guys that I watched, mostly because he was incredibly funny. I mean, it was clean humor most of the time, and that's always good. You don't get much of that. And then, I'm not a stickler, but sometimes it's nice to hear clean comedy. But again, the dispute that happened between the Daily Wire and Steven Crowder, well, that exposed Steven Crowder. I think Steven Crowder he looked like a piece of shit at the end of that. He looked so bad. They're in the preliminary stage of a negotiation about signing Crowder to the Daily Wire, and this is, every day, every contract kind of thing, where it's all just vague language, and you got to go through and make edit. You have your lawyer go through and make edits and mash out all the terms and whatever the deal is going to be. But Steven Crowder took that, and I guess he took it personally. So he called up Jeremy Boring and recorded the phone call of this guy that was supposed to be, that he said was a friend, and was talking to him through this phone call about the contract and how some of it I wish it wasn't all that. It wasn't like all that. And then Jeremy Boring gets into talking about getting people to work for him through these contracts, and makes a joke about it being slave labor. And again, Jeremy Boring's a funny guy. He can tell some jokes, and Steven Crowder's a comedian, so he can tell some jokes, and he should be able to take some jokes. But he takes this recording and he snips out that little piece about the slave labor, and then it's supposed to be like some fucking TMZ expose, like shocking. Jeremy Boring endorses slave labor or some shit, and it was like, bro, that is completely dishonest. You went in there under false pretense. You was in there recording him, trying to get something on him, and what you got on him was a fucking joke. As a comedian, like the whole thing, I was like, bro, you made yourself look fucking stupid. It was so bad. Oh shit. Let me see what y'all been saying. By saying that they sway people back toward mainstream media and away from the alternative media. It's in the narrative machine. Yeah. The Daily Wire are controlled opposition. Yeah, I read that one. A lot of Dems are so far left, they think that H3 is right wing. Yeah, he's like a left wing libertarian at best, So I don't know. I don't know how you a lot of Dems are so far left. I think that all of your loud Dems are far left. I think that like your grandpa or grandma that was a Democrat, I think that these were just fucking your normal everyday blue collar workers. I mean, this was the party that represented the working people were the Democrat parties in the 80s. So, you know, it's a big industrial time for America. Before it all started coming crashing down shortly after that. But they were all Democrats. They were all the unions. I mean, these were just normal, everyday people. And they weren't radicals. They weren't communists. They were true liberals. Like in the constitutional liberal kind of way, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, even though you still will be publicly shamed for doing some gay shit out in public, you know, those things still apply. They were still there. And they were Democrats, and the Republicans were a goofball of a party until Reagan showed up, and he was a liberal. He wasn't even really a conservative. He was a liberal Republican, or what is it? A conservative Democrat, I guess, is the correct verbiage there. Meanwhile, I'm so right wing. The Daily Wire seems like leftist in trench coat. Yeah, I mean, in some aspects, when they start talking about some shit, I'll be like, bruh. What kind of liberal nonsense you on now? I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I kind of stopped watching Crowder after all that stuff. Just seemed like melodrama and a sleazy way to get free advertisement. You know, yeah, it didn't. Nobody looked good. I mean, the Daily Wire come out unscathed in that, because as soon as you go and under false pretense you record somebody who is at the time under the understanding that you are there as a friend, but you're not. You're there recording and you're trying to get a gotcha. What's going on, King? Good to see you, man. Smoking Spaceman, I'd say that because of the narrative machine had them back then, there was only a couple of options for news and politics. That is true. They lasted so long without opposition that the average person believed what they were told. Yeah, I mean, I believe that, but I also believe that the narrative machine wasn't it. What? Trying to figure out how I want to put this, because there's a big difference between then and now. There's always been a leftist tilt to media, mainstream media in particular, legacy media. It's always had that left-wing bend, but it wasn't. It was way more objective and based within the facts. More so than today. Today, they will put some shit out and then just take the $600 million lawsuit for defamation. I mean, how many times do you have to get hit with defamation of these fucking massive amounts of money before you're like, maybe we should like get back to fair and balanced, you know? I understand that I'm right wing. I'm not going to be able to keep one of the objectives of the show was to try to keep the biases out of here, but it's so hard. Man, I am a right winger. I'm on the right. I vote Republican because that is the party that best represents my views. They don't adequately represent my views at all, but it's way better than what the alternative is. Keeping that bias out of the stories is, I try to do it in that part, but when it comes to giving my thoughts on the stories afterwards, it's really hard to keep my opinions out of there, because all the reporting that I did, those are all the facts that I know of. I try not to like put anything in there that I think is like a left-wing narrative, like the Nazi salute from Elon Musk. I'm not going to do that as part of the reporting on the story. Talking about it afterwards, I'll reference it and do all that. But the reason I don't is because that's a left-wing narrative, and I'm not going to feed that narrative. It's a bullshit narrative. The dude is like a genius autistic guy. And if you look at the jester versus the salute from the 30s, they're not the same salute, bruh. I mean, this is essentially Hitler drank water, you drink water. You're like it. It's the same art. If he would have said something that kind of would have suggested, so, I mean, maybe you can make the argument that there's some dog whistling going on, which I think is just leftist conspiracy theorying. Like, they claim the right has got some exclusivity too. I forgot where I was going with that. But it was basically keeping my bias out of the report. When I do the reading, when I do the prep stuff, I try to keep the bias out as much as possible. That's why sometimes I say stuff in there that I'm like, I know how I would word this if I was wanting to kind of soften the story just a little bit. And I can actually go back to an example that I read because it was right off the bat almost. The first sentence. Elon Musk's involvement with President Trump through Doge has tanked the popularity of the world's richest man as far as we know. So what it ends up, the narrative you can pull out of that, I'm not trying to spin a narrative when I'm saying that. I'm trying to just adequately relay the facts of the case without the spin. But sometimes the spin is kind of, you can spin out of what you're meaning to not be spin. So Elon Musk's involvement with President Trump through Doge has tanked the popularity of the world's richest man. It makes it sound like it is his association with Donald Trump. That's the narrative you can pull out of that statement, is that the association with Donald Trump is the reason that the popularity is tanking. No, the reason the popularity is tanking is because y'all are out here saying he's Hitler saluting people. That's why people are not liking him. The narrative is pervasive. And if you just show the clips like they did and not show the whole build up to it, where this dude's super excited and then he, my heart goes out to you and he makes the gesture. They don't show all of that. They just show the thing and they're like, doesn't that look like it? It's like, well, it's super easy to sell that narrative. It's all packaged up nice and tight for you. It's easy to sell. It's when you can't do the subtle spins that narratives become harder to implant into the zeitgeist of the nation of the time. What they were told in reference to your blue collar dem comment, 100% on that about Elon popularity perspective. Yeah. I don't know, back then they wrote what the truth was and only one side presented said truth. Yeah, back then there wasn't really sides before Fox News come up. It was, as far as the mainstream, Fox News was the first big conservative reaction or attempted correction to the overwhelming leftist bias within all of media. Excuse me. You had said something there in reference to the blue collar comment. I'd say that because the narrative machine had them back then, there was a couple of options for news and politics. Yeah, all left wing, all with a left wing bias. They lasted so long without opposition that the average person believed what they've done. Yes. And I don't think that there is any changing the masses on that. You might be able to chip away at the fringes there of that particular demographic of the blue collar Democrat, the Democrats that are now voting Republican. Those are those people, the ones that were chipped away and were like, okay, something's up here. And some of them aren't completely chipped away. They're just like, there is something off with this Democrat Party. They got some weird stuff going on, and they're voting for Trump. They still will like, I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal Democrat, and I'm voting. I mean, I just listened to some chick on Bill Maher sit there and lay out the Trump agenda and why it's a left-wing agenda. She was like, I'm all for everything that he's doing because everything he is doing is left-wing agenda stuff. Yeah, she talked about ending war, anti-war. I want to push back on that so hard that the right is anti-war, but historically, the right has been pretty neocon-y, going in and bombing the shit out of the Middle East. I mean, through my whole life, that's what it's been. So that's the only way that I've really known the Republicans to be is the pro-war party. The Democrats were they were on the surface anti-war, but they always backed all of the fucking resolutions and funding bills and all of these for the wars that take place. So they all end up ultimately funding it because they're getting massive kickbacks for all that shit. That's how you can make $250,000 a year and come out worth $40 million. Where was I going? Oh, the lady on Bill Maher. She talked about the anti-war. She talked about protecting the working class. You know, again, back in the 80s, the narrative then was that I do believe that it ultimately was the Democrat Party that destroyed the blue collar, the working class. But it is hard to argue that the working class didn't back the Democrats, particularly in the 80s and 90s. Late 80s and 90s. So when I say a representative of the working class, I don't mean on a principled level. I just mean on a perceptive level. So the working class more identifies with the Democrats back in the 80s and 90s, whereas that perception is switching now, and the working class feels like the Republican Party best represents and is looking out for the interests of. Tariffs was a Democrat thing back in the day. We're all about some damn tariffs. So it's always been a Democrat belief to hold to. All right. I spent a lot of time talking there. Appreciate the conversation, Smoking Spaceman. It kind of helps fill the air. I didn't know I was going solo tonight until I went live. So I don't know. I didn't know how exactly tonight was going to go. I didn't even send out notifications to everybody to let everybody know this was happening. I kind of just went on because I haven't heard from Fredo. So I pray that everything's okay. I know he wouldn't just not be here. So I'm going to move into the second topic. I've only got the two for today. I wish I would have had more for you. We did have a third one planned, but I wasn't able to get in on the I didn't able to get any research done. Like I said, it's been not trying to derail. Was just trying to feed you conversation points. No, bro, I'm off. I appreciate it. Like no, sincerely, I appreciate it. It does help fill the air. It kind of helps pass the time. I've just spent 45 minutes just on the first topic, and we generally try to limit it to 20 minutes, but I've only got two topics today, so I got to spend at least 30 minutes on each topic, and I just spent 45 minutes on that topic, so I'm free and clear. Again, Smoking Spaceman coming in for the win. Elder, hell, I feel like I'm one of the only imperialist right-wingers left. Imperialist. So there's the ideal and then there's the pragmatic, I would say. The ideal is I don't want to be imperialistic. That necessarily entails that we are going to have to make our men go and subjugate another population. And that puts our men at risk. So that would that's kind of my biggest reservation is the the blood portion of the blood and soul that is spent in order to maintain an imperialist doctrine. As it currently stands, because we are so intertwined in the world and we have bases all over the world. What's going on, JS? It is not unreasonable that we get paid for the protection that we offer. Even if that country feels like it is a mafia shakedown, we do need to be paid for, the blood that we are going to lose over there and the treasure that we spend protecting them. I think that it's completely reasonable to. So I understand. I'm interested in what you have to say about that, Elder. With the pragmatic versus the idyllic. But those men sign up and happily serve that. I agree. It's not necessarily a good thing, but could argue it's a worthy sacrifice. Yeah, but so the way that I approach trying to determine whether something would be better to do would be if the said thing was done, would tomorrow be better than today? And it's incredibly hard to try to put a hypothetical within that framework and then come out with a fucking cohesive enough answer that you can defend it if it's attacked. Get out of the camera. I don't want you on camera. Sorry, folks. But I believe that it would be better if our men didn't have to subjugate. They can still sign up and serve, and they are there to serve. But there should be a duty to the leadership of the men. There should be a duty to the men that are serving from leadership to not put them in unnecessarily dangerous situations. So you could argue it's worth the sacrifice, but people go and sign up for the military all the time, and then we go and invade Afghanistan, or we get into Desert Storm, and it's like we're now. I signed up because I love my country, and now I'm being sent to go fight over oil in another country. If we were getting the oil, that's one thing, but we're not the ones that get the oil. We are taking and defending these areas, and then other people get to pump the oil and sell the oil. Now we might get some stuff on the back end, but it's nothing in compared to what we're spending over there to get. It's essentially where if we didn't pull back with our involvement in the Middle East as deep as it's been, 20 years in Afghanistan and all that, that war front could have easily turned into the 1984 justification of constant war in order to stimulate national economy and industry. So it's kind of a bubble that is being built out of the military industry and all the jobs that kind of flow out of that, all the jobs they provide for that. So, and in doing so, we're enriching, the people that make the missiles, and these people are in bed with the people that are in government, and then it's a revolving door between the two agencies. So when you start getting into having to build an industry around maintaining an empire or an imperialist presence around the world, you're going to end up funding some of these things that we've seen over the last few decades, particularly where it is harder to hold our generals and ranking members in the military accountable until someone like Trump comes along and starts putting in, Pete Hegseth, who's promising to go in and do a full review and all, which should happen. It should. But these are just some of the problems. I'm not, like I said, in the way we currently operate in America today. If we have to be in all these hundreds of bases around the world, that protection should come with a fee. So I don't have that fee can be paid in currency, or it can be paid in oil or diamonds or whatever the fuck kind of import that we might need. I'm not against any of that, not necessarily. Elderline, I think it is worth the sacrifice. I think we end up losing more the more we just sit around and do nothing. I think we can change like 90% of the world like we did with South Korea. I think we have a lot to gain for very little risk and blood. I think we'll end up losing more. We could be just. I'm not an isolationist either. Not a pure isolationist either. But we do have to have involvement in the world at some level. And if being a protector over sea lanes for trade and such, it would fall under your definition of imperialism. And that would suffice for the imperialism that you want, I could be completely on board there. It would be more in the nuance of each situation where we'd have to get into the particulars to really hash out whether or not I would be okay with. I mean, if you're talking about South Korea, we invaded South Korea to liberate them. Now, obviously there was other motivations, but one of the stated goals was to liberate Korea. A lot of people died. We create a democracy. That democracy is going to not be around anymore in like 50 years or so. So was it really worth the blood? If we create these little democratic havens around the world that last a few generations and then, just blows away in the ashes of history. I don't know if you can justify that. Maybe you can. But I do need to move on to the next topic if I'm going to get through this for the show. I mean, the show technically ends in 6 minutes, so we'll get through this, get some additional thoughts. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do any kind of open panel thing. Maybe I can do a Discord. So I can actually go ahead and invite, because the narrative has a Discord. This Discord is more so used as a news aggregate, and I guess we might use it for call-ins. Shit, that's not right. What is going on here? Copy. That's some bullshit one. I gotta turn off the stream mode. Okay. That's the Discord for the narrative. We don't do any pings. If we do pings, the only pings that we will do are show pings. But it's also a good news aggregate because I got a bunch of RSS feeds going into here. So we got like 4 different categories: top stories, U.S. news, world news, and technology. I can expand on these things later. I kind of threw this together a few months ago working and building the show. But if you use the search function up there, you can type in the name. If you know something's happening, like something with Elon Musk is happening, you type in Elon Musk and it'll pull up all the stories that are about Elon Musk. It's actually quite useful for finding feeds. I got New York Post, ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox, CNBC. I got a lot of stuff coming through. So I might be able to do a bit of open panel. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the philosophy thing, which would have been Platonism tonight. I thought that was going to be more of a light topic. And then I started looking into it, and trying to convey that idea is going to be hard, because I try to take the stuff and I try to put it in my own words in order to try to understand it and convey it. Is going to be difficult. I don't know if I'm going to be able to properly convey what Platonism is. And then I was like, we'll do Platonism and Neoplatonism. And then I started looking into Neoplatonism, and that, it builds on Platonism, but it goes into more of the metaphysical realm of things, religious. It is the concepts there. There are some interesting concepts there that you can see some parallels between. Hit the philosophy part. All right. Well, let me get through the shutting down of the Department of Education, and then I will go through the Platonism part first. And I will probably save Neoplatonism for its own little bit, because again, that I need more time to kind of digest and try to understand that. So the Department of Education was founded by Congress in 1979 with the primary goal to disperse money throughout the schools and universities in America. Last month, the Senate voted to confirm Linda McMahon as Secretary of Education, known for her role as a wrestling executive for WWE and the wife of Vince McMahon, the founder of WWE, on a strict partisan vote, 51-45, with 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat not voting. McMahon also served as Secretary, small business affairs, I believe, was what she served in previously, in the previous administration, Trump administration. McMahon was on the State Board of Education in Connecticut and is a trustee at the Sacred Heart University in, I think that was Colorado, but I might be wrong on that. In her confirmation hearing, McMahon said it is her goal to make the education department, quote, operate more efficiently, end quote, not necessarily shut it down. McMahon did say that she intends to preserve core initiatives like Title I money for low-income schools, Pell Grants for low-income college students, and public service loan forgiveness. Trump has consistently supported and let his confidence in her be known through her entire confirmation. Quote, we would like to present, this is McMahon, we would like to make sure that we are presenting a plan that I think senators could get on board with and our Congress could get on board with, that would have a better functioning Department of Education, end quote. But closing the department certainly does require congressional action, she said. She went on to say that the enforcement of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act may very well rest better within the Department of Health and Human Services, as the agency already holds oversight on other disability issues. McMahon also suggested that the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights would be better fit within the Justice Department. When grilled on following Trump's orders when they may be in violation of law, including cuts to funding, she said, quote, we will certainly expend those dollars that Congress has passed, end quote, to the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. I was trying to get Chris to send his channel over here. He got Grumple on as a guest currently. If you're gonna keep it running or open panel, I don't know. Just trying to help. No, I mean, if people want to jump in the Discord. I think I can pin that. I've never done a pin. Let's see. Do my first pin. Oh shit! I don't know how to do it. Oh well. No, that'd be cool. I mean, maybe some people there coming over from there might understand Platonism a little bit to be able to kind of throw in, because it is a very complicated idea. JS, I have been listening to Plato's Republic little by little for the last couple of months. It's pretty neat. Yes. The way that they move through some of those topics, like when they start talking about justice, it is great for helping you understand how hard it is to define justice. When the cross-examination between I forget who the two people are talking, while Plato's giving his idea of what the ideal republic would be. The justice part was incredibly interesting, and the idea behind the philosopher kings. If we could, I think the philosopher kings is super important. I think that we have to figure out how to get our leaders to understand basic philosophy. They don't have to go in depth into all of the various niches of philosophy, but they should have a core understanding of the basics. And they should be operating off of some base principles, some first principles. Hello, Eternal. It's good to see you again. Elderline, one of the best book debates I read was Justin Martyr's dialogue with Typho, the Platonist. Justin Martyr dialogue. Typho sounds familiar. Justin Martyr, isn't he the guy that wrote the Book of Martyrs? Or I might be confused. Disregard that. Yeah, they take the whole chapter arguing about justice. Yeah, it's hard. It did. Yeah, if you get the right audio version of it, you kind of get to hear like the talking in the background, like you're standing in a public square or something, like they would do back then, where they would go to debate. It kind of like immerses you, like you're just a bystander listening to these two go back and forth. It's super interesting. An Orthodox saint. Justin Martyr is? Who is Typho? Wait, did he write the Book of Martyrs? Now I'm interested. I don't remember how to. No, that was a guy named Fox, I believe. Unless there's multiple books of martyrs, there might. Yeah, it's Fox's. Typho. Yeah, Typho sounds familiar. Typho rolls up with his gang to challenge Justin to a debate and proceeds to get mauled. Typho is a Platonist. A Platonist J? Did you mean to say that? What does that mean? Jew? Platonist Jew. Justin Martyr is the Orthodox saint. Typho is a Platonist J. I'm assuming the J there is for Jew. As of yet, I'm not particularly concerned with flags and stuff like that. I kind of have to understand where the border is by pushing it a little bit. So when it comes to, especially when it comes to news, telling stuff on the stories in the news, I'm not going to say the YouTube friendly word if it's part of the news story. Let me finish through this shutting down the Department of Education. Trump has been considering a plan that would direct McMahon to dismantle the department as much as it is legally possible. At the same time, Trump has been pushing Congress to abolish the Department of Education completely. Trump is quoted as saying he hopes McMahon, quotes, put herself out of a job. end quote. DOGE has canceled almost $1 billion in contracts from the Department of Education. It was 900 million. There was about 39 federal workers in their probationary period that was fired, according to the union that represents the workers. The department manages about $1.6 trillion in student loans. Just an insane amount of student loans. McMahon has advocated for school choice and more focus on apprenticeships and alternatives to traditional education. According to the same national poll, in fact, from our previous story, from Quinnipiac University, Democrats 98-1 and Independents 64-31 opposed the plan of abolishing the Department of Education, while Republicans 67-18 support the plan. Of course, the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the country, has stumped against McMahon and have advocated senators to reject her. Senator Bill Cassidy, chair of the Health and Education Committee, met with McMahon in January and said she's, quote, prepared to return power to parents and reform an education department that has lost the plot, end quote. When it comes to college readiness, the National Center for Education Statistics report that fewer than half of high school graduates are proficient in reading and math. Americans rank 36th in the world for quality of high school diplomas. America also ranks among the highest, with dollars per pupil spent at about $16,000 per child. Less than 40% of students are proficient in math in fourth grade. Less than 30% are proficient in math in eighth grade. Less than 35% of students are proficient at reading in fourth grade, and 30% in eighth grade. So a lot of this is my justification for abolishing it. It's obviously not. It's obviously not working as it was intended to, unless it is. So since the inception of the Department of Education, the department has increased literacy in the country by 100% in 45 years. In 2020, federal, state, and local governments spent $1.3 trillion on education. I did want to go into more specifics when it comes. What's going on, Moseman? It's good to see you, man. Appreciate it. When it comes to, I was going to get into more of the specifics when it comes particularly to the inner schools and what is taking place. It's one of the most infuriating things about a leftist that kind of stump for the status quo of education now is the education system is absolutely failing a generation of kids. And in particular, in this case, it seems to be a particular type of kid that is being left behind, and then they have to go in and fend for themselves, and it's so much easier to turn to the life of crime than it is to try to, go through the education, and the entire culture is against you, and there's so many things that's working against that. The inner cities in America, and this is every city, tends to have this problem. The Department of the Department of Education has absolutely humiliated itself in what it is supposed to be doing. So hopefully I can get in and I can get some more details on the numbers there. Again, I was having to crunch a bunch of this shit, so I wasn't able to flesh out everything as intended, but that kind of wraps up the shutting down of the Department of Education. Again, if we're going to go the idealistic versus the pragmatic, ideally, I'm not against a Department of Education if it ran as I would want it to, but pragmatically, it's not going to, so we might as well get rid of it. It's kind of how I weigh that out on the scales. So pragmatically, I'm for abolishing the Department of Education. Nerds on Ghetto Raid. What is Chris on his way over? What's going on, Chase? Mr. Robert, how are you doing? We just finished up the news portion of the show. King talked me into going into the philosophy portion of the show. I almost wasn't going to do it because my wingman's not here today, and he's kind of he plays an interesting part because we have an agreement that he's not going to be going and I'm going to tell him what the idea is, but of the topic we're going to cover, but I'm not going to fill him. He's not going to go and research it. So when I start talking about it, he can act as an avatar for chat. And, Fredo's a sharp guy, so he can ask some poignant questions and kind of help everyone better understand what it is or what I'm talking about. Even help me kind of understand some of the questions that might come up. So I think that Fredo acts as a great avatar between me and you, the chat, a great representative. What's going up, Sports Brand? So tonight's topic is Platonism. So again, I didn't think that I had just told Fredo earlier this week, I was like, hey man, we're just going to go over Platonism and Neoplatonism. And I didn't expect Platonism to be as dense as it was because there's so many different types of Platonism. People have taken Platonism and kind of applied it in other areas, and we'll kind of go through all of that as we work ourselves through it. So I guess we will start at the top. Platonism. Platonism is the view that there exists abstract objects, where an abstract object is an object that is non-spatial, non-temporal, non-physical, non-mental, and non-causal. These abstract ideas Plato called forms. Forms are the greatest expression of a quality or of a property. Well, it doesn't clear very much up with that definition. So we'll go through some examples and try to help clear it up. Did we hit 30? Hell yeah. Thank you guys. So non-spatial just means it's not in space. Non-temporal just means it's not in time. Non-physical means it's not made of material. Non-mental means it's not mind-dependent. And non-causal means that it has no ability to act on a physical object. Not directly anyway. So a simple place to start in the Platonist view is with the ideas that numbers are abstract objects. They are just as real as a rock, just not as a physical object located in time and space, but in a metaphorical Platonic heaven. More precisely, numbers exist independently of us or our minds, but don't exist within space and time. Okay. So, Plato called these abstract objects, he called them forms. And the definition of form, according to Plato, is the greatest expression of a quality or a property. So we can get into the idea of Platonism extends also to properties like redness. So red is a property of a red kickball. So that the redness that is within that ball is a particular redness, but so it is a reference. The referent or the universal or the form of red is what the red kickball is emanating from. There's a lot of emanating that goes on in Platonism, particularly in Neoplatonism. So you have to forgive all the emanating that will happen. It also applies to properties like redness, straightness, or beauty. There are many red things, red balls, red cars, red paper, that exist as particulars in the physical world. Platonists posit that red, the property itself, also exists as an abstract object or a form. These red objects are said to instantiate or exemplify redness. The same thing applies to straightness or beauty. Here is a quote from Plato on beauty. If anyone tells me that what makes a thing beautiful is its lovely color or its shape or anything else of the sort, I let all that go. For all those things confuse me, and I hold simply and plainly and perhaps foolishly to this, that nothing else makes it beautiful but the presence or communion of absolute beauty, however it may be gained. About the way in which it happens, I make no positive statement as of yet, but I do insist that beautiful things are made beautiful by beauty. That is confusing as fuck if you haven't grasped the concept of forms or abstract objects. So Platonism does not only apply to properties observed in the physical world, but also properties that are not observed in the physical world. An example of property not observed in the physical world would be a cell phone with the property of a mile-long screen. Though there is no physical example of this property, Platonists say that this property does in fact exist. Some of the other examples that I heard is like a 400-story building. This concept, this abstract object, the concept, the property of 400-floor building, is a real object. It is just not within our space and time. So whatever it is that we perceive on our end of which is basically the tail end of all the emanations that are going on. When we get into Neoplatonism, the emanations, it gets way more metaphysical, and some of the parallels you see between like Neoplatonism and, for example, explanations of the Trinity or some Muslim thought is also has some Neoplatonism that is associated with it. It's interesting to see all these things, how they've kind of melded together, philosophy and theology and such. So there may not be any physical example of a 400-story building. Platonists would say that this property does still in fact exist. This particular idea may seem silly at first, but if you apply it in the context of history, it can make a little more sense. Take the cell phone as the example. The property of instantaneous wireless voice communication didn't physically exist 100 years ago, but could you say 100 years ago that those properties don't exist, or would you say 100 years ago those properties haven't been discovered? The Platonist holds the view that these properties just haven't been discovered. They are still there. They're still emanating. There's just nothing that has exemplified the what's going on, Chris? It's good to see you, man. There's nothing to exemplify the property that exists at the time until eventually it does. What if we were to look into a possible future? Would you say that the property of flight in a car doesn't exist, or would you say that it just hasn't been discovered? So Platonism, again, is the idea that basically outside of our perception, except through the mind, there are abstract objects that do exist. They exist. They exist outside of time, so they exist eternally, essentially. They have no cause, because they have to be non-causal in order to fit the definition of abstract. But that things in the real world are emanations or imperfect reflections of the real thing out there. The idea of the Plutonic heaven, it can cause confusion if you're not careful using the analogy, but it can help clear up some aspects of Platonism. The idea of the Plutonic heaven, this is the place where all of the abstract ideas reside in their purest form, in their most pure form. I don't know exactly the terminology you would use to describe it because I didn't have much time to dive into it. So all of these abstract ideas, all these concepts, all of these properties, they all exist within this plane called or dimension called Plutonic heaven. And it is from here that the imperfect reflections from the natural world, these abstract ideas are reflected off of. I believe, if I remember reading correctly, that the entire idea of Platonism came about because basically the atheists of the time, the worldview that was I can't remember the damn name of the philosophy, but it was falling apart because it wasn't able to address some of the more metaphysical. Platonism has had a good and bad relationship. Yeah, I agree with Christianity. Yeah, I mean, you can see where there's overlap. I mean, I've only wrote a little bit about Neoplatonism, so I guess it might be a little bit of a spoiler or a tease, if you will, because I've got to really flesh this out. So it's only a paragraph and then like another sentence. So I'll read that, and that'll kind of give us an idea of what I'm going to try to tackle next week, which will be more metaphysical, because abstract objects are not, in the Platonist idea, they're in the Platonist view, they're not metaphysical. They're still part of our world, part of our reality. They're real. They're just, you can't touch them or see them or point to them or anything like that. You can only basically deduce them. So on Neoplatonism, Neoplatonism seems to be Platonism that has been ran through religious and theological scrutiny, spearheaded by an Egyptian philosopher named Plotinus. It is incredibly coincidental that Plato and Plotinus and Platonism and Neoplatonism, because Plotinus is credited for being the father of Neoplatonism, which is kind of merging the metaphysics of Eastern philosophy, Buddhism, with Western philosophy, mainly Platonism. It's trying to bridge the two, it seems. Oh, yeah, let me do that. You can join me on Discord if you want to talk about the Platonism or the Neoplatonism. So Neoplatonism personalizes an abstract object that is referred to as the one. Now, this is all according to Plotinus. Is that not it, King? What does that go to? No, that goes to the narrative. I guess something. Is carrying him pretty hard. So this is where the reference of the one comes in, because again, this is Neoplatonism in a way is the collision of Eastern mysticism with Western philosophy. Okay. The one was the ultimate form from which all other forms emanate. The one must be self-causing, all-causing being. Plotinus introduced two other forms or abstract objects, as Plato would refer to them, the intellect and the soul. The one is also called the good or the beautiful. These are all synonyms. The one, the good, the beautiful, they're all one under one title, or they all are interchangeable for the same reference. The one being absolute perfection overflows and emanates the nous, or the intellect or mind. From the nous, the soul emanates. From the soul, nature emanates. It is important to remember that all of this outside of nature is taking a place outside of both space and time. So it's going to be really hard for me to go through this because I'm not a philosopher. I just do this shit because I find it interesting. I've only read a few books from Plato and Dostoevsky and Nietzsche. I've only read very little of this stuff. So I'm going to try to muscle it out with you guys. So hopefully you'll bear with me. So the one being absolute perfection overflows and emanates the nous. From the nous, the soul, and from the soul, nature. Nature is the physical world. It is important to remember that outside of nature, the one and its emanations are taking place outside of space and time. The one is beyond understanding and exhaustive description. From the one emanates nous. Nous is the first principle in consciousness in which all knowledge is contained, again, which resides outside of space-time. So, that's all I've got on the Neoplatonism. I was going to go through each of the one, the nous, the soul, and nature, and kind of break these down and how they interact with each other. So I guess that's kind of what we'll go over next week after that show. Let me catch up on some chats here. Where are we at? Elder, the only interesting conversation I've had with a Muslim was a Platonist Muslim, but I think Platonism was carrying him pretty hard. I feel like Plato, this is from Sport Brand, I feel like Plato was way too in love with Socrates. Socratics? Aristotle seemed much more balanced in his opinion. I liked Aristotelian logic more than Platonic. Not to say Platonic isn't useful. You did mean Socrates. Okay. Robert, the one, the good, and the beautiful sounds like a soap opera. Yeah. Elder, I think Neoplatonism was a response to Christianity in the early centuries. Don't know that for sure. Just heard one person say that once. It could be true. I couldn't. I'll be looking into it more throughout this week, going into the next show. So hopefully I'll be able to supply an answer for that. In fact, I might be able to just copy or make sure that I remember to try to answer that specific question. Or a Western. Yeah, it does sound like a Western. Oops. I don't want to mess with Steps Mojo. I want him to present his ideas. Okay. I'm not really. This isn't really presenting my ideas. I'll interlace my opinion with it a little bit, but a lot of this stuff is, particularly this, is dense. So last week when we did the theories of truth, that was interesting, and it was easy to kind of follow the train of where that was going until you got to pragmatic truth, and that shit is just chaotic. but this is a little more dense, so it's going to be harder for me to like have a true opinion on where these things. I mean, when you hear it, in a sense, it seems like through Neoplatonism, that is kind of, we use a Neoplatonic idea in order to justify objective morality, or to claim objective morality. You know, that from my understanding, the Neoplatonic idea is that God is the perfect form of what morality is, of what justice is, of what goodness is, and of what beauty is. And these things are, we see reflections of these things on earth. Because this was one of Plato's topic, one of the things he talked about when it came to beauty. He says you can look at one painting and it have colors, you know, and you can say that the ocean is like an orange and a yellow, and that's going to look cool against a blue sky. But you look at another picture, it's another painting, and it has the same color with the same beach, yellow and orange, but instead this time it's a greener sky. So the beauty doesn't shine through it as much as it does with this other one. Now, it's a subjective mostly, though I do believe that there is some objectivity in beauty. It would be hard to argue that, but that's what I believe. So yeah, it seems like the Christian's idea of objective morality is a Neoplatonic idea, which emanates from God, as we would say it. You should read Tolstoy. Yeah, I'm not against reading anybody. Right now, I am reading God is a Man of War, from Stephen D. Young, Father Stephen D. Young. I got through Elder. I got through that, the Church of the Apostles. Was it the Religion of the Apostles? Early Church Fathers, or the Religion of the First Century, or the Church of was something along those lines. I finished that book, and that book was interesting. So I heard Jim Bob talk about the God is a Man of War book, so I decided to pick that one up. I went and I read, a few years ago, I read Is God a Moral Monster? And that had some interesting takes. You know, this is before I ever tried to, you know, argue with justifying Old Testament stuff. But they're pretty interesting books. And with the Religion of the Apostles, the concepts that he talks about in there, when it comes to Satan and the devil, and these two beings not being the same entity, and kind of laying out the understanding through the early church, it was fascinating, because I had never, you know, it's not something I've ever really questioned. There's so many other things I've been questioning, you know, that I haven't made my way around to that one. So when I finished, when I heard that concept, that one really interested me. And then there was what was the other one? I don't remember. I have to go and some of these books, man, because I do an audiobook and I'm not actually sitting down and reading them, sometimes I have to go over them 2 or 3 times before I start really understanding the ideas that they're kind of convey. I feel like Plato. Oh yeah, Socrates, the good, the one, the good, and the beautiful. Those are good books. You're doing a great job. From Sport Brand. Chase is calling chat delusional. Right on brand. What's up, Chase? I don't know if I said hey to you. Out of here. Hope my actions helped you. Appreciate it, Smoking. Herodotus. Am I saying that right? Herodotus. Yep, Smoking was our very first chatter in the narrative on episode 1. He was there at launch. So, W's for Spaceman. Samuel being the serpent was something I heard, and not in the same way as it was described in the Religion of the Apostles. Yes, Samuel being the serpent. Oh, the other thing was the 3 falls of mankind. The sin, death, and principalities. Him walking through those, that was an interesting concept that I'd never thought about. But when he was talking about it, I was like, man, that makes a lot of damn sense. So yeah, the Religion of the Apostles is a great book for learning about early church history. How basically the book kind of contextualizes what Jews understood at the time of the apostles. How they would the context in which they were perceiving Jesus and the gospel of Jesus. So yeah, that was interesting. But that is all I have tonight. Hopefully Fredo's okay. He still hasn't gotten back with me. So if y'all see Fredo, tell him to check in. His homie's worried. But I appreciate all of you coming out tonight, hanging out with me here on the narrative. I will be back here, hopefully with Fredo, next Sunday at the same time. That is 11:30 Central, 12:30 Eastern. Every Sunday night. We're going to be looking into putting out content through the week, but it will be pre-recorded stuff, so it won't be live. So I appreciate all of you hanging out with me tonight. So come back next week, and I promise I will dive into this Neoplatonism and the just Platonism in itself. Try to get a better grasp. I think that I understand what Platonism is. I just don't think that I can adequately convey that idea to people who don't know what Platonism is. So I'll see if I can try to read more on it and try to understand a little bit more, so that I can try to help the chat understand Platonism. It is interesting, at one time it wasn't an idea, and where did people think numbers and letters come from before? I don't know. But that's the development of philosophy for you. It's back and forth. All of you have a blessed night. Thank you for coming. We will see you. Yes, sir, King. We will see you next week.